Hello, I'm Jalen Edwards, and this is my minifig scale Millennium Falcon. I started with an exterior that a guy named Marshall Banana made online, and my idea was just to fit an interior inside of his design, and then I realized it was a little too flat, so I kind of manipulated it to work it around the interior that I wanted to add into mine, and that's kind of how this model came about. So as you can see, it's the Force Awakens iteration. There's Rey in the cockpit, there's a square satellite dish on it, and I think the most interesting thing about this model is first and foremost, probably the inside, but also the fact that the bottom is probably just as detailed as the top. I would love to show you it, but this thing is really heavy, and I'd hate to drop it on camera, so I'll leave that up to your imagination, but I promise you it is there. So
you can take sort of the panels off here and show the interior?
It comes apart in little sections, and it's nice because everything just kind of sits in there, so there's not any tight stud connections where I'd tear something off on accident.
Yeah, very cool. So all these different parts come off.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's honestly, I had to memorize exactly how it can come apart and come back together. Like, I've gotten in situations where I'll start putting it back together, and I realize, oh no, this other part has to go over it, so then I have to restart. So all of these just kind of come off, and I looked at a lot of the cross sections books for the Millennium Falcon to make sure I had at least most of the rooms. I think the only main thing I'm missing is there's 2 rooms in here, but I had to have the Technic structure for the mandibles in the front, so it's kind of hard to implement that. I may eventually end up doing something in here, but in the meantime, I have everything that you see on camera, so that was probably the biggest goal of mine, getting everything situated. So as you can see, like in the front main room, there's the couch, and then you can see Han and Chewie are finding Rey, Finn, and BB-8 in the little hole in the ground. And then if you come over here, you can also lift this panel up, so when Han wants to smuggle spice, that's where I imagine it would go. And if you come like around here, this is the hallway where Chewie and Han would come into the Falcon and say, you know, Chewie, we're home. And then here, I'll actually turn it around. Back around here to the main hallway, this is kind of like a little comm section where a lot of panels and electrical things like that. And then this is the Hyperdrive Room, and this is the scene where C-3PO gets tangled in wires and thinks he's melting. R2's probably going to help him out with that. And then Han's putting his moves on Leia over there in the cargo room. And then, of course, there's the Hyperdrive back here. And an interesting thing about this is that, like, I guess in the original models of the Falcon, it was just intended that this room would be 3 different beds. But in the newer versions for The Force Awakens, they changed this to a kitchen and a bathroom. So I thought that'd be a little bit more interesting. So if you guys are ever wondering where the bathrooms in Star Wars were, there's one in the Millennium Falcon. Go figure. Mm-hmm. And then if you come around back over here to this side, this would be the section where Han and Luke would have run into the hallway to the guns at the top and bottom. And I made it to where you can pull this out. So if you want to place a figure in the bottom, you can do that. And then I have Finn over here in the top. I guess technically he should be in the bottom, but it's a lot easier to see it this way. And then finally, over here in this section on the front, that's the bed where when Chewie gets shot, he's sitting down and Finn's trying to tend to him. And I think he almost killed him like 6 times. And then also there's Rey in the cockpit piloting the Millennium Falcon. And as the one little play feature on this, if you look on the side, the bridge can open and close with a Technic mechanism. And if you swing around back, we got the Hyperdrive actually functioning. I know how rare it is to see this, but yeah, the Hyperdrive's working on the Millennium Falcon.
You got the lights in there. Was it hard to incorporate the lights? Or?
Yeah, it was. The hardest thing is always just like the wires, because there's not a lot of space back there. So it was a lot of just figuring out like how they would fit in the little crevices. I mean, it doesn't look pretty by any means, but this is really the best way I could get them to all fit in, because there's just so many of them that you need to kind of have it look like an LED strip. I wanted to stick with pure Lego elements. So having to try to incorporate that was a little difficult. And also, I realized that I had to make it blue somehow. I considered making just the plates on the back all light blue, but 1, those are expensive, and 2, the Millennium Falcon doesn't look blue on the back when the lights are off. So what I ended up doing was just having blue studs right on the other side of the lights, so when it shines through, it actually looks blue, but when you turn it off, it just looks, you know, like the normal backside of the Millennium Falcon.
Well, that worked really well. So when you first started on this build, where did you kind of start from and build out from as you kind of made the structure and everything?
Right, yeah. So I started out with Marshall's exterior, and then I kind of made like a floor in it just to see like if a minifig would be able to stand in it, and it obviously couldn't. So I went through a bunch of different things, and then I just decided, okay, I want to build a structure, like a square big enough to fit in this, because it's easy to build squares in Lego, and then kind of like see how the panels can fit and hinge into it. And it's a lot of really complex angles in this ship, so I used one of the techniques I saw in the most recent UCS Snowspeeder with having the rubber bands kind of keep them anchored to the bottom. So that really helped me out in figuring out how to keep the panels on the bottom connected without figuring out some complex, geometry for the getting like a stud connection at that weird angle. And then it was really just a lot of like seeing whether or not this room can fit in here, and then like putting the top back on it and seeing like if the top could fit flush on it, and if it couldn't, taking it back out, lowering that section a little bit. And then at the end, it was just like figuring out, okay, how can I make these panels sit in here and in like a nice and neat looking way, and filling in some of the holes so it looks like a decent ship from the outside, but still allowing you to be able to access the inside pretty easily.
Yeah, well, I think it came together really well, and I love all the detailed interior in there. That's something you don't see on a lot of Millennium Falcons, so I think that's really neat. Thanks for showing it to us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you for the interview.